The sun was dying over the plains that evening, bleeding itself out across the horizon in streaks of copper and crimson. When Marshal Ethan Crow rode down the old river trail where only ghosts and desperate men dared to pass, he had been chasing the scent of a raiding party for 3 days, a band of rustlers who had left behind smoke, blood, and the kind of silence that follows a massacre. But what he found instead was a girl barefoot, mud-caked, her dress torn like a ragged flag in the wind, standing knee-deep in the dry riverbed with her hands clutched around something wrapped in a torn length of cloth. She couldn't have been more than 19, but her eyes were ancient, wide and glassy like those of a deer that's heard the wolf breathing. "I'm not clean anymore," she whispered when she saw him, her voice cracking like brittle twigs. Ethan dismounted, the leather saddle groaning under his weight, and approached slow, one hand resting near the worn grip of his Colt, the other raised to calm her. "What happened to you, girl?" he asked, scanning the horizon for shadows that shouldn't be there. She shook her head, and tears streaked the dust on her cheeks. "They said I was clean before," she murmured, "but now I'm not. They did this to me, and I can't wash it off." Ethan felt something twist in his gut, not pity, not yet, but the ghost of a memory from the war, when young faces like hers were left to the vultures, while men like him rode away with medals. "Who did this?" he pressed. "Where are they?" Her hands tightened around the cloth bundle. "Gone," she said. "But this is all that's left." The wind picked up, sending a shiver through the willows that lined the dead river. The smell of wet iron clung to the air, though the river had been dry for months. Ethan glanced at the bundle. "Let me see," he said, his voice low, the way one might speak to a skittish horse. She flinched. "No," she whispered. "If you see, you won't help me. No one will." And yet her fingers, pale and raw, seemed to tremble toward him, as if some part of her wanted to be rid of it, to pass the burden on. The marshal weighed his choices in that long, amber light: ride away and leave her to the coyotes, or open the door she had cracked and risk what lay beyond. He had ridden too far to turn back. "Look," he said, and stepped closer, the dry river dust crunching beneath his boots like bones. She sank to her knees, the bundle clutched to her chest, and for a long moment Ethan thought she might change her mind. The sky dimmed to violet, and the first bats darted from the canyon mouth, their wings slicing the dusk. At last, with a shuddering breath, she held the cloth out to him, and he took it gently, like one might take a newborn or a snake. It was heavier than he expected, and warm despite the chill of evening. The cloth was stiff with dried stains, some dark, some recent. He crouched, heart thudding in the hollow of his throat, and began to peel it back. The girl turned her face away, hands clasped over her ears, whispering something that sounded like a prayer or a curse. The first fold came loose with a sound like tearing bark, and then the second, and as the last layer fell away, Ethan Crow, a man who had ridden through 5 battlefields, who had seen the Rio Bravo run red with men's last sins, stumbled back as though struck. Inside was a hand, not just any hand, but a woman's hand, severed clean at the wrist, the skin pale and puckered as though it had been pulled from deep water. On the ring finger was a gold band, its stone cracked, and around the wrist a ribbon of red string that hadn't yet faded. Ethan swore under his breath, dropping the cloth as though it had burned him. The girl whimpered. "See," she cried, rocking on her knees. "I told you, I'm not clean anymore. I carried her. They made me carry her." The marshal's mind spun. Who was she? Whose hand was this? And why did the night now feel as though the stars themselves leaned in to watch? "Where's the rest?" he demanded, more harshly than he meant. The girl sobbed, shaking her head. "Buried in the orchard. They said the rest was for the crows." Ethan rubbed his jaw, the stubble rasping like gravel. A name rose in his memory: Eliza Harrow, the banker's wife, gone missing a week past. Last seen riding with a black carriage near Widow's Bluff. The ring looked like hers. "Girl," he said slowly, "you know what you're holding." She nodded, teeth chattering though the night was still. "A curse," she whispered. "They said if I kept it safe, they'd let me live. But they didn't. They laughed. They said I was dirty now, same as her." Her words crawled into his bones, colder than the desert wind. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and the girl flinched so hard the rope burns on her wrists cracked open. Ethan crouched again, this time looking not at the hand but at her, really looking. Her feet were torn, her dress stitched with strange, hurried seams. "Who sent you to me?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to the east, where the ridge cast a long shadow. "I didn't come to you," she said. "You came to me. You followed the trail. They wanted you too." The marshal's stomach turned. The cloth lay open between them, its grim cargo gleaming in the moonrise, and for the first time, Ethan felt the creeping sense that he had stepped not into a rescue, but a snare. They made camp by the river stones, though sleep would not come. The girl who said her name was Mara sat near the embers, staring into the flames as if they held the faces of her tormentors. Ethan kept his revolver close, his horse restless, ears twitching to sounds beyond the dark. The hand lay wrapped again, though tighter this time, hidden beneath his coat, but its presence was a weight that pressed on his chest. Mara spoke little, only to ask for water and to shiver when the coyotes yipped near. Around midnight, a low thunder rolled across the plain. Though the sky was clear as glass, Ethan stood, scanning the horizon, and saw nothing, yet the sound grew, a distant drumming like hoofbeats on hollow ground. Mara's breath hitched. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who?" Ethan asked, hand on his gun. "The one they said would take it back," she murmured. "The one who marked me." She lifted her sleeve, and for the first time Ethan saw the mark, a handprint, black as soot, burned into her skin, just above the elbow. It wasn't a bruise. It wasn't ink. It looked older than she was, as if the flesh had remembered something the world had forgotten. Ethan felt the air grow colder. The fire guttered, the horses stamped. "Get behind me," he ordered, though his voice sounded thin in the vast dark. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence fell heavy as a shroud. Then, from the ridge, a figure emerged, tall, wrapped in a long coat, hat brim low, face hidden in shadow. He rode a pale horse that made no sound on the stones. Mara whimpered, curling into herself. Ethan raised his gun. "Who are you?" he called. The rider did not answer. He only lifted one gloved hand and pointed to the cloth under Ethan's coat. The marshal's throat went dry. "You want this?" he said, his voice cracking in the cold. The rider tilted his head, a motion slow and deliberate, and for the first time Ethan saw what hung from the saddle. Horn, another cloth bundle, dripping something dark that hissed when it touched the ground. "You brought me one," the rider rasped, his voice like rust on old steel. "Now bring me the rest." Mara screamed, and the rider vanished as if the night itself had swallowed him. Only the hoofprints remained, smoking in the dust. Ethan sat by the dead fire, the cloth heavy in his hands, and knew that whatever game he'd been dragged into, it was older and deeper than any badge could shield him from by dawn. The sky was a bruised yellow, and the land looked like it had held its breath all night. Ethan and Mara rode hard for the old harrow orchard, where the missing woman's trail had gone cold a week before. The trees stood like gallows, their branches bare, the ground churned by hurried shovels. They dismounted. "Here," Mara whispered, pointing to a patch where the soil looked fresher. Ethan knelt, hands raw, and dug. The earth gave way to something foul and soft, the smell of iron thick enough to choke on. He found the rest of her, Eliza Harrow, butchered and bound, her body marked with the same black handprint that marred Mara's arm. She was the first, Mara said, tears carving white rivers down her dirt-streaked face. They said the mark spreads. First her, then me, then you. Ethan swallowed bile, his hands shaking. "Who are they?" he rasped. Mara turned to the orchard's edge, where the pale rider now stood again, silent and still as the dawn. "Them," she said simply. "The ones who say none of us are clean." The rider raised his hand, and the trees groaned as if 1,000 whispers rose from there. "Run," he told Mara. "I'll hold him." She didn't move. "You can't fight him," she said. "You can only choose." The cloth in Ethan's coat seemed to burn, the severed hand within twitching as if alive. He realized then that the rider wasn't after her alone. He was after the proof, the token, the thing that bound their fates. With a curse, Ethan hurled the bundle into the dirt. The rider stepped forward, the ground darkening beneath his boots. "You took her," the rider whispered, voice like distant thunder. "Now give me the rest." Ethan squared his shoulders. "You'll take nothing while I stand," he said, though his knees trembled. The rider's shadow stretched long, wrapping around the trees, the sky, the girl. And then just as the cold closed in, Mara screamed again. "I'm not clean anymore." The sound ripped through the orchard, rattling the branches, and for the first time the rider stopped. He did not vanish. He did not strike. He only turned, as though the cry itself had marked him. In that pause, Ethan grabbed Mara's hand, yanked her to the horse, and rode until the orchard was a smudge on the horizon. Rode until the wind returned and the sun rose red as a wound. But he knew the story wasn't done. The cloth was gone, but the mark remained. On her arm, on the land, perhaps now on him. As the prairie opened before them, endless and empty, Ethan looked once more at the girl beside him. "We'll find a way to end it," he said, though the words tasted like dust. She said nothing, only wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the sun as if daring it to burn her clean. And somewhere behind them, a horse neighed in the dawn, and the hoofbeats began again. If this story gripped your heart, if it made you feel the chill of the West's forgotten ghosts and the weight of sins too old to bury, then saddle up with us. There are more roads to ride, more secrets to unearth, and darker cries yet to hear. Subscribe now, so you don't miss the next tale when the cloth is pulled back again, and something stirs beneath.